Well, hello there, and welcome to the Second Life Book Club. My name is Draxtor. Today on the show, BBC presenter and journalist Alex Humphreys with a must read for everyone who cares about social virtual worlds, games, VR, open world games. She wrote a book with the title Playing with Reality. The subtitle is Gaming in a Pandemic. It's incredibly rich in different perspectives and motivations of why we make games, why we play games, use cases that techies I think also like to uh, to call them. Now, people do know that I'm not a gamer. I'm actually also sometimes known as a snob who looks down on gamers because I am above gamers as a virtual world person. Today, we want to celebrate any type of digital engagement, embodiment, and world making or world exploring. The book is really incredible. It's incredibly rich. It's actually, let me look this. It's 360, 70 pages. And there are indie games in there. Look behind the scenes of giant MMOs. I learned what full motion video is. Games that use FMV technology that's been around for a long time. I had absolutely no idea. The book also covers Animal Crossing, which I'm a little familiar with, having made a documentary that partially deals with Animal Crossing. But it also has other games like The Last of Us and whatnot. And of course, the bonus is that our own Shyla the Super Gecko, Gentle Heron from Virtual Ability are in this book. And on a lesser note, a guy by the name of Philip Rosedale. I don't know, nobody ever heard of him. And I am also in this book. I was interviewed by Alex. I learned tons reading this, and I also learned to appreciate games at a different level. And again, I say this tongue in cheek, but uh, there are two sides to the coin, and of games and virtual worlds, and we'll talk about it. And I also really appreciate that Alex was not shying away of talking about, the dark side of addiction, gambling addiction, internet use disorder. The term that the WHO coined. We'll talk about that. I have it on the slide. I already forgot what the actual term is because I don't want to know about it. No, I do. And we need to talk about this. We need to talk about addiction. We need to talk about coping mechanisms and so on and so forth. But this is about the fact that games and worlds helped people overcome isolation in a very, very difficult time. Alex Humphreys is with us. Alex, welcome to Second Life.
Hello, thanks for having me. This is a first for me to do something in Second Life. It's bizarre, but very cool. So thanks to everyone who's just come along tonight or
But
today.
you,
It's
but
8
you've
p.m.
been
here in
here
UK, but it's
before.
12 down there, isn't it?
Yeah, but you've been here before. I mean, you've done
I
this is
have,
the
but
first
I've
event.
never actually done an event here. This is cool.
Hmm. You've been alone, but now you're with us.
Yes. Now I have friends.
Is the avatar to your liking?
I love the avatar. In fact, I'm wearing a top exactly like that. Well, the same sort of color, same pattern. um, and red lipstick as well. So yeah, I've tried to match it as possible, as close as I possibly could tonight. So I'm not sure. Who did you say it was who designed it for me? Done a really good job.
Isabel Sharon, who is also running camera and sound today. She is
Oh, Isabel,
responsible for.
thank you so much.
So this is very good to know that you also have wings in real life. I didn't know this.
Oh, well, didn't you? I didn't want to say anything.
Okay, so now you are, and this is actually interesting. So you have a history with games. Um, oh, Monkey is pasting this here, gaming disorder. We'll talk about this later. Thanks, Monkey. So in the local chat, I also want to welcome folks on the YouTubes, and people know that I look over there. If you feel that I'm ignoring your question or comment on YouTube, just repost it, and I'll look over there again. It's on the separate screen on the other side. But uh, for now, Alex, what game helped you through the pandemic?
Well, there were a number of games that I played throughout the pandemic, but the first one and the one that sort of spurred me to start the book was Zelda Breath of the Wild.
Mm,
And I just loved that game. And I played it on the Wii U, which is quite an old console, um, compared to the Switch. But I'd had this wrapped, this game, I hadn't touched it for years. And I was waiting for like a literal rainy day to play it, to open it. And pandemic hit, I was at home and I thought, you know what, this is as good a time as any to start it. So yeah, so everything was a little bit chaotic in the real world, and I put the game on, and then all of a sudden, like the sounds of it sort of just the music took over, the colors, and then I was on this horse running through this field, and I just felt things just well, the real world just slipped away, and it was magical. I just felt like I was in a totally different world, which I was. And and then I decided, you know what? I'm going to write about this because I'm sure I'm not the only one who's been helped by like a game like this in these times.
mhm. Now, I have this picture that you sent, or this photo that you sent, and I realized that you were part of the screen generation for a very long time. If the camera can go onto the slide here, this is little Alex on a Spectrum, a ZX Spectrum computer playing Manic Miners. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. That's my uncle's Spectrum. And yeah, I was about 2. I asked my mum how old I was, and she said, "Oh, I think you're 2 there." So yeah, I've
So
been
this is what
playing since I
happens
was 2.
basically. If you put 2-year-olds in front of a screen, they will become journalists. So be careful, especially when you have Manic Miners. Here, actually, I didn't know what here's a screenshot from Manic Miners. It's they call it platformer, right?
Yes. Oh, it's a great game. And the music, I just remember the music more than anything. It used Griegs in the Hall of the Mountain King. And I think
Oh,
actually it was games that actually introduced me to classical music because I'm also a musician and I studied music. And I
mhm.
think it started in games. That's when I started having a love of music as well.
Well, what's all of that? Dun 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 no 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 no
Yes,
no
that's
dun
it.
dun 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 da 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 do do do. So now this is awesome, and I prepared the hour a little bit, but what you were talking, I want to throw this out there right away. Um, the pandemic hits, it's really tough. Everything is upside down, and games soothe. And just as you talked about Zelda and the music, and you're engulfed, and you're in a different world where things are possibly simpler. Now, generally, you hear people when people say that people will immediately say, "Well, this is escapism, and it's very bad." What do you
Why is it
think
bad?
when exactly? That's why I'm asking you. Is it bad? Is it good? What is escape? How would you define it? And riff a little bit on that term.
Okay, wow, that's a tough question. Thanks for that one. So escapism, well, I obviously don't think it's bad. I mean, I think it's just like anything really. In small doses, anything is okay. But if you try and escape, it depends also what you're trying to escape from and what your state of mind is, I think.
Mhm,
Um, for me, I go into game worlds for escapism because my job's quite busy, quite stressful. Um, can be very pressured. So when I come home from work and if I want to forget about, you know, about my day, if I'm watching TV, my mind is still on the day. If I'm reading a book, I'm still thinking about my day. But I find that if I am playing a game, my mind goes completely to the game. I'm just taken away straight away. Um, so there's nothing that can replicate escapism for me better than gaming because
mhm,
it makes you switch off because you're having to concentrate on something else. Um, and I mean, for me, that's a good thing for me because then I can, when I can feel like I've had enough, I'll come out of that world and I'll come back to the real world. Um, I think, I
So
think
it
for some
also
people, maybe
recharges the
escape.
batteries. I mean, this is similar to what I did, and we'll talk a little bit later. You saw my movie, The Virtual Cultures in Pandemic Times. That's what a lot of people expressed is when I kind of pressed them, like, are you kind of running away from stuff? And people were saying, like, actually, no, because the and this is kind of what I hear you express, is kind of recharging the batteries.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and
definitely.
what maybe a yogi would do with meditating, um, you kind of do it that way.
Yeah, and it's like playing the piano as well. I was saying I'm a musician as well. The playing the piano, playing the cornet, and gaming are the only three things that will give me pure escapism, where I am totally in a different world.
Hmm.
As I was saying, like if I'm engrossed in a film or whatever, my mind can still wander. But pure escapism to me is, gaming or playing music. I don't get I'm not my mind's not taken away from that activity. And I think that does recharge the batteries for me. I'm not saying that that is how it works for everybody. Um, and I have spoken to when I wrote the book, I spoke to somebody who works in the NHS's Centre for Gaming Disorders in the UK, and she was telling me that obviously, for people who struggle with addiction, going into a game world, or doing anything for a long amount of time to escape from problems, maybe might not be the best way, best form of best use of games, maybe. But she did highlight, though, that anybody who does have what they call gaming disorder, it's usually with an underlying problem. So it's usually not games that have caused it, but it's something else that's caused it, and they're using games as a way to try and cover up the problem, maybe.
I think there's no doubt, and I don't want to make this show too much. There's a lot of stuff to cover here, and I think and this is about you and your book, and I think people know my opinion on this. I am definitely a little worried about the incentives that are built into commercial games, that keep you hooked, and I think it is the way dopamine works in the body. I think it's very, very easy to um to get hooked and forget other things. For example, for me, the pandemic was not easy, but it was also kind of awesome to have that much time available to, for example, get back into like practicing piano, for example, right? And as you know, as a musician, practicing is not always fun, but you know that you need to practice in order then to perform something really cool. So the reward is a little bit delayed. It's not immediate. Like you're playing these scales and they sound awful, but then they get a little better. So I, I've read a lot of literature where people really say the issue is that the reward system gets sort of, rewired in a way that might not be good. In other words, we expect rewards to be instantaneous and very, very quick when we engage with video games in particular. That's
Yes,
something that I'm worried about.
yeah, and that's a valid point, and yeah, that is a good point. And I think it's one, it depends on the way you play, and also what type of person you are. Do you have addictive tendencies? Um, Also, what types of games you play. Um, Jeremy Della Rosa actually touches on what you're talking about there in the book, and because he set up a company called Leyline, and that actually does incentivize, it gamifies the real world, basically. So he he wanted to link gamers to good causes, and I think that's what you're on about, isn't it? You heading into this chapter here, where basically you can do a good deed and you get something for doing it. And I mean, good there were some positives for that, because he says that the reason he set up his company was that he didn't want all the wealth that is in these tech companies, these big corporate, these gaming and tech companies, to stay within these big companies, but he wanted it to go back to the communities. And he
Hmm.
said to me, when I interviewed him, he said something that was quite scary at the very beginning of the interview. He said, "Have you read the book Ready Player One?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, I think that's could be what we're heading to." And he said, "I want to stop it. I don't want us to get there." I want us to not forget about the real world, and go off into this virtual world. So he's trying to link gamers to completing these good causes within games,
He is from
and
Proof
thinks
of
that
Good Tao, right? From
yes,
Proof
that's
of
it.
Okay,
Yeah,
I have a
yeah,
slide here. Here we go. I'm just gonna put the
yeah.
slide out there. Yeah, I mean
So
that's
I
a
mean,
yeah, that's definitely, an interest. I think that's a laudable way to take the energy that is there and to funnel it to good causes for sure. I- I-
there are obviously two sides to it, and I see your point of trying to do people want something too quickly these days, and that was a good analogy that you used with the scales because yeah, I mean it's something that I've noticed a lot with children that I've interacted with, whether it's for work purposes or whatever, or friends' children, um, that yeah, they want something straight away. They're impatient, and I think we see it in films as well. You can watch a film now and compare it to I don't know, like Grease or a film from like the 70s or whatever, and films that these days are so faster paced. And I think it's because we all want something straight away. We're not willing to stay with, a long scene maybe. And videos as well. I mean, social media hasn't helped at all because look at TikTok. TikTok videos are, they're so short that it's not helping people's attention spans. So I don't think the problem is gaming, just gaming. And
Absolutely.
gaming's
And you
not
touch
perfect.
about this in the absolute I agree, and you touch on this in the book as well, is actually that social media, the way it's presented now with the algorithm rewarding also, I mean the reward system I think is upside down, is way, if you want to compare it, that is actually much more damaging than games. And again, I want to apologize for throwing like all games into one pot, because what is really cool about your book is also that there are so many different types of games, and I want to go through a bunch of them, and I have a bunch of slides here. But you just mentioned also that this guy here from Proof of Good DAO and some others acknowledge that, and I think that's important to recognize, that some of the big gaming studios, not all of them, have, it's a huge business, it's a multi-billion dollar business, and there are incentive structures built in that obviously try to keep you hooked on that particular game or MMO or whatever the franchise is.
Yeah,
And that, to me personally, it doesn't have to be that way. It could be different, right? A game could be just really awesome and you just want to play it to win or to hang out with your friends. And the interesting thing about Animal Crossing is also, sure, you got to complete stuff in Animal Crossing, whatnot, but it's not really mandatory. And you point out Sharon is one of the protagonists in the movie. And you interviewed her as well. I'm going to put up a slide here. This is her, musician actually. Um, she just also enjoyed just being in there and wandering around the environments.
yeah.
But she is interesting because she's a musician, and I was like, now you have more time to practice. But she's also a performer, and for her, the practice leads to a tour. And since the tour was canceled, she said, like, why do I even need to practice, right? I mean, that
Yeah.
totally, that makes sense too. I'm in the other boat. I'm not touring. I'm just like, playing for myself, and then I record music and I mix it. It's like I could get my chops up a little bit so my recording goes a little better, I guess.
Yeah, it's funny how everyone's different, isn't it? And I found her story in the book fascinating, and how the racism she suffered as well, which
The
I
race,
wasn't expecting that
yeah, the
story.
anti-Asian racism around that
Yeah,
time, and I know it flared down a little bit, but it was connected to, the China virus and that kind of rhetoric. It was pretty bad. Yeah,
yeah, it was really bad.
she was afraid to go outside.
Yeah, and she said, trying to remember the quote off the top of my head, but she said something like, at first when she started going out again, she would wear a hat and a mask so that people couldn't see what she was. And the fact that she said what she was, I was like, what? I just can't comprehend anyone having to think that way.
Mm.
But she didn't want people to see that she was Asian, um, because she was getting such harassment on the street. So I just thought that was just shocking. But So it was one of the reasons, like, she told me that because it was one of the reasons that she turned to Animal Crossing, to Game World, because she found like-minded people there, and it really got her through lockdown.
Now, let's go through a few of these games, which just found awesome. So you profiled this guy who has a project in Minecraft where he wants to build the entire planet in Minecraft. That's amazing. I love Minecraft. Minecraft is like, Minecraft is what Second Life could have been. I mean, Second Life is awesome, but Second Life also had a place actually for youth. There was Team Second Life, was separate, and I'm still sad that it didn't turn into Minecraft. Oops, sorry, this is the wrong one. I chose the wrong one. This comes later. But here is the Bayern München soccer stadium in Munich, Germany. Here is, of course, Berlin, Brandenburg Gate, and so there's groups all over the planet that he coordinates through the website. He wants to build the entire Earth in Minecraft.
Yeah,
Isn't
it's
that
a cool
amazing?
project. Yeah. And it was great timing as well, because I think he dropped a video on YouTube of his sort of his ambition just days before the first lockdown, I think. And so it was just great timing that all of a sudden he had all these eyes, these more eyes on his videos, and everyone was like, "Yeah, you know what? We can't go out, so why don't we rebuild the world online?"
Amazing. Here's the website Built the Earth, and what I threw in here before. This is a Google Maps with these little dots. They basically represent groups that are working on stuff, and then when you zoom in a little bit more, you can see a grid of places that are free to build. And so he coordinates that all through the builttheearth.net website. Really cool. Another thing that I love is a little a small game called Cat Colony Crises that you kind of profile. Do you
Yeah.
remember what that was about, the Cat Colony Crises?
Yeah, so this was the game that won a game jam, a game jam over lockdown. So I don't know if everybody here knows what a game jam is, but basically it's where a group of people or developers or individuals will get together and or work alone, and will try to create a working game within a set time frame. Like it could be 24 hours, 48 hours, or a slow jam as they call it could be like 2 weeks long. So you've got
Hmm.
to have the game working, the basics of the game working by the end of that time. And usually they're face to face, but they went virtual in 2020, obviously. And the winner of this one was Devil's Cider's Cat Colony Crisis, and it was based on a game where you had to try and these cats were running around everywhere, and you had to try and get them to follow these rules. So it's kind of based on what was happening in the real world.
So
Yeah.
this is a great example of tying in the issues of coordinating response to the virus. People maybe not, they may not be complying. Actually, they did not. A lot of people did not comply, caused all
Mm,
sorts of things. And they put this into this game, right?
yeah.
That is that
And
that's
the one
awesome.
thing, sorry to interrupt you there. The one thing that isn't in the game are vaccines, because at the time that it was made, we didn't know about the vaccines. And I find that's really interesting, because if
Hmm.
I look back now, I can barely remember that moment when we didn't know if there were going to be any
Right.
vaccines. It's hard to remember that time, isn't it? Because
Yep.
now we
Yep.
just have these vaccines are here. But yeah, there was a time when we didn't even know if we would ever get a vaccine. So, yeah, that's why he said he didn't put them in the game, because we just didn't know at that time.
Another game jam or a workshop that is happening this is a summer camp. Girls make games. Um, and that is also very, very cool. There was a 10-year-old who made a game called, here's a bunch of pictures from previous workshops, pre-pandemic. I think nobody's wearing a mask. That's from their website. So they also did that virtually. And this 10-year-old made a game called Dear Tech Support. So I'm putting up the slide here, which is hilarious. California went into shelter in place due to the COVID pandemic. In the coming weeks, many students started school remotely and learned how to use plethora of online tools. I mean, this is really, ripped from the headlines basically, and really telling the story from the perspective of this 10-year-old, which was extremely difficult. I mean, we all know the disparity and inequality in terms of access to these tools was a huge issue in terms of getting everybody a machine, and and getting them online, and just move the classroom online. Here is the I played this a little bit. You can play this in a browser. It's awesome. Here, this platform. You got to jump here. Tech team, please help. And then let me put up the next slide here. Here, then the interstitial is your parents got more routers. Unfortunately, there's a very limited radius where you can actually get Wi-Fi from them. You're only allowed to be out of that radius for 10 seconds at a time. Um, and then you go to the level 2 here. You got to jump up, and you can see it says my computer went completely bonk. And then you got to jump here to the flag to go to the next level. I mean, really a great example of working through real issues with games that are fun. And again, this goes back to escape. Is this escapism? No, this is working through issues in a very creative way. And again, Alex, I only role play a snob here in Second Life. I have to completely acknowledge that I'm absolutely fascinated by people using these tools to make their own things, and put them out for others to enjoy. So that is it. My issue is more like an input output thing. You know what I'm saying? There's
Yeah,
got to
I
be like
yeah.
a balance between what comes in and what you put back out. That's
Well,
sort of my thing.
you know what, with this 10-year-old and all 10-year-olds now, I'm imagining, but they just learn differently to the way we learnt when we were in school. I mean, their lives now are so entwined with the digital world in a way that it wasn't for us, or wasn't for me anyway. I mean, the fact that she's even had the creativity to think of turning real world pandemic problems into a game, I think it's just fantastic that she's even thought about that. Um, and she's obviously blurred these realities perfectly. But I think we might look at that and think, oh, yeah, she's using games, but to escape maybe. But I think 10-year-olds today, I just think they see it as part of learning, that it's a tool to learn, and I don't think they see it as so much of a distinction as we do.
Well, I mean, and this is an example that you can play through with physical objects too. You can play with dolls, and they could have a conversation about issues. So this is just a play that has moved to a different medium, the screen or
Yeah,
the machine. Um, it's again, and I don't want to kind of harp on this, but we're going to circle back on that a little bit here and there. What I tried to do in my movie is to really get all these perspectives going. And I put up a slide here with Peter Watts, who, for him, he's very critical of all this kind of stuff because he calls it pacifying. I mean, especially Animal Crossing, he would classify as a pacifier that keeps us from dealing with real issues. And I do think he has a point, but at the same time, coping mechanisms are different for different people, right? I mean, I don't know. It's
definitely. No, I definitely agree with you on that one. I think the key to it is finding out what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And you know, um, the person that you talk about there does have a good point. I mean, maybe at 10 years old, you don't know if you're gonna maybe have addictive tendencies. Um, and if learning environments are using these from a very a young age, then yeah, I guess we don't know really what the implications are going to
well,
be.
in that regard, I
For
would actually
everybody.
say a 10-year-old and kids, and you work with kids with the kids program, it's much, I don't know. I think it's obvious that it's much harder on them, the pandemic. And when somebody says, okay, we got to learn to look, the chaos in the eye, and look reality straight in the eye, I would say, yeah, I can do that. I don't know. I'm genetically wired that way, that I can sort of look at that stuff and go like, yeah, the world is going to shits. Let's do something about it. But I cannot expect this from people who are suffering from trauma, and especially children who are probably on the most part much more fearful, and also
Different ways to help us deal with things like this, whether in the the physical world or the digital world.
now, where was I going? Oh yeah, here. The Scion games is also really cool. They built a game called Antidote COVID-19, which also ties in with the pandemic. And this is a mobile game, I think. This is a little bit here from the game trailer: vaccinate and spread the word. And a great example of, oh, sorry, this is the cat colony crisis again. Here's the Scion games. And what was really interesting, this is a small independent game studio here. They can work together. It's a game studio from Finland. What was really striking to me, Alex, was that some of the big game companies, that you people that you interviewed, were talking about how difficult it was that they were on lockdown and that they didn't have their team together. Now, me working as a contractor for Linden Lab, we've been basically working remotely for a very, very long time. And it's just second nature. I mean, we literally use Second Life to meet, to be on the ground, to discuss things. Um, to me, it's really surprising. I don't know if it's surprising, but it's a little bit shocking that the people who basically work and produce products that you're able to use irrespective from your geographic location, have such a problem shifting from an office model to a remote model. Like, for example, Electronic Arts. This was an interesting story. They recorded this a Star Wars game score individually, and then they mixed it together. I mean, I do this all the time, and I know a lot of people who do this. And I was like, really? I mean, I gotta honestly say, there's a little. It's a little sort of weird that they don't take their own. They're not getting high on their own supply. I have that same uh, experience with VR people in the VR industry who either produce games or apps and work in hardware, headsets and accessories, because I'm on several mailing lists, and they kept going on and on about, oh my God, we can't do the convention, we can't do the Silicon Valley Virtual Reality Conference, we can't get together. And I go, and I was one time I was emailing them back, saying, guys, we've been doing the Second Life community convention in Second Life when it was still happening. I mean, come on, you guys are selling a thing, right? That is supposedly letting people connect, and you can't put something on online. You got to have like a physical convention building. Come on.
But
So
you make a good point there, and I think Second Life and everything that you've been doing, you're clearly ahead of the game. I think that it is funny how so many people did things a certain way, and I think the pandemic has definitely shown how a lot of people, a lot of companies were behind in that sense. But I think what the pandemic has done is made people catch up very quickly. I think somebody, can't remember who it was, it might have been Jeremy De La Rosa, it might even have been Philip Rosedale. Someone said to me that the pandemic has squished 5 years of technology adoption into 2 years, and we've just sort of
mhm.
just we've accelerated greatly, and so many companies are now catching up, and they probably should have been in this place, in this position, way before the pandemic. So it has made people catch up, definitely. I think if you've done something one way for so many years and it works, why I think people might just think, why change it? Like you mentioned the orchestra there that EA um, recorded musicians individually and then put them together. Um, I guess if they always use an orchestra, then they wouldn't have had that issue before.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean,
so
it's pretty obvious. It's a sign of privilege. I mean, a little
yeah.
anecdote: the Masked Singer is a show that people might be familiar with, and there was a vocalist here in Second Life who actually recently just passed away, Tony Harper. Very had a full life, and it's wonderful. Still sad, but they wanted to have somebody in avatar form, and I talked to the producer in LA, and Tony lived in Palm Springs, which is about 2 hours drive. And the producer in LA said, "Yeah, we would love to have her on the show with Masked Singer. We do like she comes in as an avatar that's amazing, and then she's revealed. Oh, that's her. This her avatar. Here's her." And I go like, "Yeah, that's cool. Let's do it." And he says, "Okay, yeah, but she needs to go to the studio in LA." And so this is a slightly different issue, but I said, wait a minute, she's 84, she's mobility impaired. She could probably, if you send a limo down, she might do it, but it's very hard for her to sit in the car. Why don't you fly somebody there or drive somebody down and film a remote and put her remotely on a video or even as the avatar, since the whole point is avatar. And he was like, no, that's not how we do things. And yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. I find that's rather lame, but who am I to judge? Delia Lake says here in the local chat, I think this is about coping. Delia says, there's another important aspect. Facing reality with only the mindset, understanding, and tools that you already know may be insufficient to address the issues. That's what I mean, Delia. But these are coping mechanisms. This is resilience, commonly referred to, that we need to learn. Delia says exploring issues in a game situation can expand a person's horizon and help them to see beyond their normal, everyday, automatic way of thinking and acting.
Yeah,
I
that's a
agree
good
with
point.
you, unless it depends on the game, obviously. If the sort of incentive structure is to level up by killing zombies, I know I'm using a random example, then
Mhm.
that might be a little reductive. I don't know.
No, I agree. That's a good point, though, that Delia makes there. Um, Game worlds, virtual worlds can offer something different, and especially with if you're going into somebody's creation and like Second Life, for example, I spoke to Cardiff and Vale International College, who
Yes.
over the pandemic, they recreated their campus in Second Life so that they could give their Chinese students an induction that they couldn't they would have had to cancel because obviously they couldn't come over from China to Cardiff as planned. So they did it in Second Life, and now they hold a lot of lessons in within Second Life. And it was such an eye opener to me when I was taken on this tour. I just thought, wow, I never ever thought about doing like maths in a virtual world, and I can totally see the possibilities for it now. And I wouldn't have done if I hadn't have had that tour. So I do think that going into somebody else's creation and seeing them say, "Here, why don't you do it this way? And look what this can do." I think it's just amazing, and I think it can only be a good thing to be to to be open, like open-minded about things like that.
Ah, I
Definitely.
feel so old. I feel like a guy who says, "Oh, the kids with their music." We've been teaching in Second Life for almost 20 years now. I mean, not, people have been, but what they're doing at Cardiff and Vale College International, that is very cool. I only have a few images here that I found, and you sent me one. Let me retrieve that with the dragon. Uh, this is very cool how they gotten into that and giving also the students kind of a college experience and that kind of thing. I mean, that is here we go. Here's the dragon, a really kind of a nice place that they built. And again, just for the record, I'm not knocking games with an incentive structure. I mentioned like killing zombies or whatever. This can still be a fun activity where in a multiplayer setting, the players together work through issues by talking about stuff, talking about real issues, connecting and having a community together during a difficult time in lockdown. But now, Alex, and you have great examples here too, where game makers collaborated with the World Health Organization, which are very positive. Have you encountered, because I do see this as a real issue, have you encountered people who talk about um, sort of a toxic game culture where people harass other people or spread sort of misogynistic viewpoints and stuff like that?
Yes, I've heard about that a lot. Yeah, I absolutely have, especially, working in the media. It's something that I've not actually experienced myself, and I think this is mainly just because I mainly play solo.
Hmm.
Um, the the most I've played as a multiplayer in a multiplayer game was back over 10 years ago now. I used to play World of Warcraft. I used to love
Hmm.
it. And I got really involved in a guild and in the chat and everything. But I didn't back then. It was just all text-based chat. It wasn't. I didn't have a microphone, so nobody could hear my voice. Nobody knew if I was male or female in the real world, so it wasn't
Hmm.
an issue for me. But yeah, I've heard some horrible stories of people saying that they won't streamers saying they won't identify themselves, they won't turn the microphone on, they won't say that they're a woman, um,
Right.
because they get people saying to them, "Oh, what are you doing here? Go back to the kitchen," and and
Yeah,
I had
and again, I don't. Yeah, I'm sorry to jump in here. I want to make clear that I'm not singling out games. If we're talking about games, I actually think the bigger issue is YouTube, quite frankly, because this misogynistic, feminist stuff is peddled on YouTube ad nauseum. There's people who have 3 hour daily shows who put that stuff out, and then young men go into games and then they spread that, right? Like go back to the kitchen and crap like that.
yeah, I think it's something that yeah, it doesn't seem to be going away, does it, with social media? I think it's just got worse. Um, I'm definitely seeing a lot more of it on Twitter and all the social media platforms. Really, there's always
Yeah.
examples of it, aren't there? And
That's actually really an example of social media stuff bleeding into games.
yes,
It's not that the
yeah,
games is not the origin. The messaging and those talking points are peddled on social media, and then impressionable young men pick it up, and then they spread it with their folks in world. Yeah.
mm. Shila's just commented. I think you were talking about our previous discussion about um education and game rules, if I'm right. Um, He says a lot could be learned in Second Life, scripting, building, customizing, streaming, and lots of real world aspects. Music, for example. Do you see this as significantly different, Alex, from other platforms? Um, Second Life, yes, I do. I haven't used many virtual worlds for education, so I can't really compare it to anything. But I my eyes were completely opened when I went on that tour with Cardiff and Vale College. I just saw the opportunities, and I think maybe it's because it's such like an open slate. It's a blank slate, isn't it? Second
Hmm.
Life, you can do anything with it. Whereas a lot of game worlds, there is a purpose there already. So you're working that, music or something into a game world that's already been constructed for a purpose. Whereas Second Life seems to be, you can do anything you want with it, which I think, Draxter, you said that in my book, didn't you? You could throw a lot of paint on the wall and do whatever you want. Um,
Yeah, that's
so I,
what gamers don't like. What I realized in your book, I use the word "what the hell" or the phrase "what the hell" a lot. Thank you for printing that. Actually, you're pretty okay. Sorry, on page 162, which is hilarious. I wrote it down. You said when Second Life launched in 2003, 500 articles were written about Second Life a day, half of them which were in print. I thought that's brilliant writing, Alex. I
Yeah,
love that. It's
Philip
like,
told me that fact.
oh, okay. I was like, wow, that's how old we are. We actually had newspapers in print.
Yeah, yeah. Um, but just to quickly go back to Shila's point, I'd say Minecraft is up there with one example that I have seen
Yes.
that's really good at doing similar things that you can do in Second Life.
Now you
And
mentioned
it's actually free for schools in Wales as well, so they use it as a tool quite a lot.
that is very cool. I mean, there's Minecraft is really awesome. Now, but you also, I love also World of Warcraft. The World of Warcraft documentary, 2009, back for German television. But what I was not aware of here is what you mentioned in your book, this corrupted blood thing. Can
Mm.
you talk about this real quick? This was in 2005. The programmers had a great idea, and it kind of went sideways.
Yeah, it didn't quite go to plan. So, for anyone who's not familiar with World of Warcraft, I'm sure you are, but it's a massively multiplayer online role-playing game, and within it, you're this character, and you go around doing quests, and you get you fight these bosses basically. So there was a new area that was created in this update to the game, and there was the boss of the area. She had this spell, and that she'd cast this spell on you, and it was called Corrupted Blood, and it was supposed to last 10 seconds. It would drain your health over 10 seconds, and it was quite a high level spell. So only players of a certain level, like quite high level players, could go in this area and actually, have a chance of beating her. So what had happened was there was a bug, there was a glitch that meant that. Oh, also one thing you need to know about this corrupted blood spell as well is that not only did it drain your health over 10 seconds, it was contagious. So any other avatar that was stood next to you would catch it within a certain radius. Um, anyway, so it was only supposed to be in this raid, this special area, and it wasn't supposed to be able to penetrate outside of the raid. But the glitch meant that the spell could be cast on avatars' pets, and when
Yes.
you leave a raid or this separate area, you dismiss your pet, and then
Right.
whatever spell is on your pet, whatever like little thing is on your pet will pause. And then when you res it in the outside or the outside game world, um, it it still has that spell on it. So that was the glitch. It transmitted to pets, which it
It
shouldn't have done.
transmitted and pets basically being also non-player characters, and I'm putting up these slides here. This well, here you see a bunch of skeletons on the ground, but here you can see like all just dead people on the ground everywhere.
Yeah. So what was happening is that people would leave this raid area and go back to the game world, and everyone was catching this corrupted blood, and of course only certain higher level players could withstand it, and so it was like a pandemic. It just wiped out all the weaker players, and if you rezzed, as soon as you rezzed again, it would just kill you again if you were
Mm.
a certain level. So it was like a pandemic, and
Oh,
it pricked the interest of some epidemiologists as well, who thought, you know what, this is so interesting, this is fascinating, seeing how people are reacting. That they wrote a paper about it, a scientific paper, in the hope that people would learn from it about how we would react in a real pandemic. And it's interesting that people have did react in similar ways.
absolutely fascinating. I'm going to throw up this here on the slide projector. This is a completely different thing. This is a kind of a text-based game that I found very cool. It's called Go Viral. It's still up there. It's called goviralgame.com, I think. And it helps. Here it says it helps protect you against COVID-19 misinformation. And you basically act like you're on social media, and you have a social media account, and then you can sort of post certain things. This is my character. I'm named Joel, and my tagline is I like big books and I cannot lie. I didn't make this up. This is what the AI, the algorithm, created for me when I was playing this. Um, Very cool. And you can see up here the credibility meter, and then the credibility meter goes up and down depending on what you're choosing to post. Uh, it's very cool. I mean, very really creative and much more. Again, goes to the topic what we're talking about here with games being able to. I mean, with you can teach media literacy in schools in a very didactic way. I don't think that works, and this is a wonderful tool here. So here Joel says, social distancing. I rather be social dancing, dude. So it's very playful, very, very cool. I'm looking at the time. Oh my God, the time flies. It's unbelievable. Alex, I'm gonna go to the next thing. I need you to explain to me what full motion video is. God, I had
Okay.
no idea. This stuff was around since like the mid 90s. Where was I
Yeah.
in the mid 90s? Oh, wait, I was in a recording studio every single day. No, go ahead. What is full motion video and how does it apply to games?
Okay, well, it looks like a film or a TV series, but it's actually a game, so it's not animated. Basically, it uses um, real life actors,
Mm-hmm.
and so it looks like you're watching a film or a TV series, but it is actually a game, and you get to make decisions. I don't know if anybody here has seen Bandersnatch on Netflix, which is part of Black Mirror series. That is a full motion video. It's, filmed with real people and then but just with game mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's this company in Wales called Wales Interactive. It's Wales's biggest game company. And they over the pandemic, they've made full motion video games before the pandemic, but they've also made what we would might think of as more traditional games as well, animated games. But what they found over the pandemic was obviously they couldn't do their normal. They couldn't work the way they normally did, and they couldn't get into the studio to access the really high tech, expensive kit that they would use to make their games the normal way. So they decided that actually they could make games a lot quicker if they focused on full motion video games. So I think it's fascinating.
So
They
then
they
during
made
the
like
pandemic, sorry to interrupt you, I'm throwing some random pictures up here. I'm going to go to Wales Interactive in just a second. These are just sort of older, different examples of full motion video. But basically, as you're saying, Wales Interactive then had to deal with the fact that these actors, they have big studios and stuff, but the actors basically had to film themselves, right? Or more or less at home,
yeah,
and then they had to piece it together. So this is, I'm putting up a slide right now from their game 10 Dates, where people filmed themselves on their phone, and it's a game about dating.
yeah, and it was really easy to make apparently. When I spoke to the company, the director sent the actors a box full of props, and so anything that they wanted to be in shot, it was sent to them. They had like a box of like a kit that they'd put
Hmm.
on in their homes, and then they'd film it themselves. And so they created a game that was essentially filmed by each actor themselves or on
That
Zoom.
is awesome. See, that is very cool. That also shows you, I think, shows us the creativity also, but the tools are just more available. The light, you can get the light and you can get these props. You're sending them out and people can set up their own stuff. I mean, it's amazing. One
Yeah, and the
question.
script
So
was
these
sent to them as well. Yeah.
so the game mechanics, would you say, are they, this is what I understand with these full motion video games, are they a little bit like choose your own adventure books as games kind of?
Yes,
Uh,
that's it. Yeah, so those books, I used to love them. You
Yeah,
get
me
to a
too.
page and it says, if you want to do this, go to page 70. If you do that, go to page 90, whatever. It's exactly that in game form. Um, so with these FMV videos that Wales Interactive made, yeah, it would be all be filmed by, on Zoom or something, or the little pieces were filmed individually, and then the director or whoever, the producers, they'd put it together. Um, and the company had this sort of like a tree of they'd work out, what the options would be for people to choose, and so they had lots of different options. Like say if you click yes, she can date that guy, whatever,
Hmm.
then the story will follow that route. But if she chooses, oh, I'm going to date her instead or whatever, then the story will go down a different route. So they've filmed loads of different options, and
Hmm.
it's up to the player slash viewer to decide. And I think it's just such an interesting way of making games in a pandemic when I think they cottoned onto something that they could knock out these games quite quickly. if they were just filmed like remotely or filmed over
Right.
Zoom.
Star is asking here the final product they broadcast themselves. No, I don't think Star. I think my understanding. I mean, this is a game, right? You purchase the game, and then
Yeah,
you
yeah.
you you
So
can play it.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it was made by the company, and yeah, you can buy it from Steam.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so I think it was just broadcast when they did say, like when I was talking about Zoom, it would just be for the company. It would be a closed Zoom. Do you know what I mean? It wouldn't be for the audience. That was just
Yeah,
the
yeah.
process of
This is the
getting
process
the
of getting
footage.
the footage together.
Yeah,
Exactly. So they use that to the effect also with the storyline, especially in this 10 dates. My understanding is that I mean they're reflecting what's actually happening, that people are isolated and they're using their phones to communicate, and that becomes part of the story in the game.
yeah, it's clever, and it
Yeah,
all
very cool.
started because I think it was the writer was gutted that he wasn't going to be able to date for a while, in real life, obviously. He was reacting to the pandemic, so he thought, oh, yeah, let's make a game about this, about my
Mhm.
frustration of not being able to date properly.
Now, oh yeah, here's the other thing that I forgot earlier. I do want to address this, and the time is running. So crush COVID, hashtag crush COVID. That was the World Health Organization collaborating with some of these game companies, right? It was the and what did they do? You have a bunch of examples in the book. It's amazing. Also, they bought a bunch of entities bought ad space in games to for mental health services. But riff a little bit on this crush COVID hashtag, and
So
also the other one is play apart together.
yeah, so Crush COVID wasn't with the World Health Organization. That was with that was I'm just trying to remember now. That was um, Canadian Games, that service that did that. Play Apart Together was the one that was working with the World Health Organization, and it was started by Zynga, also a group of people at Zynga, decided that they were going to try and do something positive, and World Health Organization were also looking for a creative way to reach, you know, the younger people. I'm guessing, specifically, and they thought that they could get together, team up, and start this hashtag play apart together, and encourage people to follow the rules by playing games. And so a lot of different companies like Zynga and Codemasters, um, Ubisoft were involved, and they would get involved in different ways. So for example, Codemasters had on in the game Dirt Rally 2.0, on the side of the tracks, they'd have banners, and the banners would say, um, "Stay safe, stay home," things like that. And in Candy Crush, there was another one that you might have messages pop up that said, "Stay home, stay safe." So it was all about pushing health messages, public health
Mhm.
messages within games. And I think it's an interesting one because you could. It also depends on you. Do you want to see those messages in games?
Mhm.
Perhaps it might help some people, and it might make them think, "Oh yes, of course, yeah, let's stay at home and play more games." But other people who might just want to play a game for escapism and to
Right, and they
forget the
don't want to
chaos
be
that's going on, they
absolutely.
don't want to be reminded of that. So, I mean, that was one of the questions I put to the companies, to Codemasters especially in the book, and it's interesting, yeah, their take on it. And Football Manager, for example, they definitely didn't want it to penetrate their game,
Mm.
so they had some tough decisions to make because Football Manager, I'm not sure if you've played that game, um, where you
No,
you are a football manager basically.
I don't even watch football passively. Look, when I
Well,
go into a room, I when we lived in America and you go into a room with other men, and the icebreaker is always like, "Hey, did you see the game yesterday?" And I'm like, "What? What game?" And then they look at me, "Oh yeah, he's from another country. He's weird." Anyway, sorry,
uh,
go ahead.
no, I was just going to say that Football Manager, they didn't. So although football games had been cancelled for a time, And when they did come back, they had players off with COVID, and also they didn't have any fans in the stands, of course. Um, the head of studio at Football Manager, he told me that Miles Jacobson, he said that they definitely didn't want to reflect the pandemic, even though their game is all about reflecting the real world, the football world. They decided
Hmm.
they didn't want it to, because they were worried about triggering people, specifically um, men as well, young men who play the games. And so to try and help them out, they would put on the barriers, the hoardings along the side of the pitch, adverts to mental health charities, and because they
Right,
wanted
that's what I found
everybody to,
really interesting. They had information about how to get in touch with mental health services in
yeah,
game. That is
yeah, and
really interesting.
it
Yeah.
is, yeah, and they didn't have any reference to the pandemic, of course, but they just wanted, they said they wanted people to just be a click away if ever they needed help.
Mhm.
So I thought that was really interesting.
That I find quite positive. I've been throwing up here these different slides here, and I don't want people get confused again. These two hashes, there's Crush COVID. Shyla put a little collage together here. We couldn't find anything with the player part together. I find these initiatives very interesting. Again, we need to get people informed in the spaces where stuff is happening, and here the stuff is happening in these spaces. Now, let's move to the most important thing, which is, of course, Second Life. And here is a quote, and that was really also fascinating. You interviewed Philip Rosedale. I sent him a message. Maybe he didn't respond, but he knows where we are right now. What I find really interesting as a virtual world enthusiast, and also someone who feels that VR headsets are very interesting, Philip says in your book, the observation that we've made during COVID is, and he's referring to his next generation virtual world High Fidelity, um, which closed down in the way that he ran it. The observation that we've made during COVID is even perfect spatial audio isn't good enough to get most adults to be willing to socialize in a communication medium. COVID shows us how beautiful human communication really is, and how difficult it is to just transfer it online. And it's really cool to see Philip being, not that he's never outspoken, but he is very much acknowledging the the issues of getting people enthused about virtual worlds. And I mean, I find it. I applaud him to with his tenacity. I'm frustrated as well because um, this seems very obvious to have a sense of space and to have these geographies collapse and be communicating together. And I bump in this all the time when people say, "Oh, what an avatar! Wow, that's so weird. Oh, wings. Alex Humphreys has wings. What is wrong with her?" Um,
Yeah, and
or
people
the
will,
people
people do say that.
or people get hung up on certain sort of realism of looks. I mean, there's just a plethora of issues, and here Philip acknowledges that we are probably far away, right? Is what he's
Yeah,
saying.
yeah, he
Yeah.
says we're just not there yet. He's trying, obviously he's worked so hard over the years to try and get people to use virtual worlds more, and he says he struggles especially with women, and which is interesting because he also told me
Because
that
women,
more women
exactly.
are
No, you say it. Mhm.
successful. So
Yep.
you're gonna go there, were you? Yeah, that women are more successful in Second Life than men, apparently, according to research
Yep.
that they're working on at the moment, which is really fascinating. But
Women are more
persuading
successful in second. There is data on running businesses and other things very successful in Second Life. But what did he mean by saying like they can't get women into like
to feel
to
comfortable as avatars, I think that's what he was
hmm
saying.
hmm
He said that more men sign up to Second Life than women, but
hmm
women spend more time using it. So the women who do sign up spend more time using it and are more successful than the men. according to this research. But what he's saying is that if a lot of women don't feel safe when they are in a
When it-
virtual world, a virtual
right,
environment. And
right.
specifically with VR as well, if you put goggles on somebody, they would be like, "No, I just don't feel safe. I don't know, don't feel comfortable," I think is what he said. But, and I totally get that. I think there's, it's not the same connection, is it, as face to face? Um, there are obviously a lot of positives to it, but I personally, I do see that, like, I would be worried of who I'm really talking to. Do you know what I mean? Not
That
that
is
I'm not
something.
worried here now, but if I was going to be dating, for example, in virtual worlds, there's always a worry, and I think maybe I don't know if it's like girls in particular who might feel it more than men, maybe, but
I mean, if people want to chime in here from the audience, I mean, I hear what you're saying loud and clear, and I don't want to dismiss these issues at all. But my immediate response would be, if you're dating in the so-called real world, you don't know who anybody is. You don't know
no, that's
if
a
that
fair
dude
point.
is lying to you or whatever.
You're right.
Um,
But
and
a layer of the onion has been peeled down, do you know what I mean? Because I can see their mannerisms, I can see how they're reacting
yeah,
to me.
yeah.
I can tell if someone's looking at me in a dodgy way, do you know what I mean? But in a virtual
That
world,
is a very good point. That's actually something that Philip, I know, has been working really hard and wanted to get there very quickly with that. That was a focus with high fidelity and some of these other next generation virtuals to translate the subtle um, facial expressions in real time by using the camera that looks at your face and modeling that. That is
yeah,
something that they're all working on.
and
But
eyes
see,
as well,
yeah.
you know, seeing someone's eyes can tell a lot when you're talking to them,
Yeah,
and I
I mean
think
it's complicated because that's a double-edged sword as well. I mean, I really don't want to be on camera all the time. I mean, we're talking about Zoom fatigue, for example, and another issue that you talk about in the book, which I think is also super important about neurodivergent folks. In my movie, we had Sarah Littman, an author. Her son is now 23 or something. He has autism, and she talks about that virtual worlds and games with a limited ability to transfer these emotions. That information was actually very good for him. So
yeah,
there's always these two sides, and I gotta say that the for many people that you talk to, this the Zoom fatigue has to do with people not wanting to be on camera at all times.
yeah, and
And
I would agree with you there
yeah,
totally. Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? I see both sides totally. Um, and I think that's another reason why a lot of people didn't want to go into virtual worlds over, you know, or after lockdown or even during lockdown was because they felt that they had too much of it on Zoom in work, and they didn't want to have to then go into another virtual world. Um,
yeah, but the
yeah,
virtual world is freeing from Zoom. Look here, look at this audience. Camera, please go over the audience. We have the embodiment. We can embody as we wish. We don't have to put makeup on. We can uh I mean, that's a ridiculous thing anyway, but don't get me started. But we can be a leopard. We can be a goat.
yeah,
Gwendolyn here, one of my favorite avatar. Look at this avatar. We can embody in a way that we want. This is completely freeing us from what I feel is the oppressive nature of the camera. And I mean, I know you're on camera professionally. I am sometimes on camera. This is part of the deal. But to force people to be on camera, to force them to be extroverted, um, while they
doesn't
may
work.
not be wired that way, is incredibly, this is discrimination in my book, to be honest.
Yeah, it's very stressful for the person, isn't it? If I can totally see that.
We have Gentle Heron here actually in the audience from Virtual Ability Island. And Gentle, if you want to chime in a little bit, because I have a quote you're quoted in the book as well, and that is a little bit depressing quote here, but I think it's accurate. And you're saying, I have not seen more support, understanding, or even tolerance for people with disabilities now that we're past the isolation phase. I fear that many non disabled people learned from quarantine that this sort of life is intolerable, says Gentle Heron. I find this incredibly instructive quote, very important quote, important statement that people really need to reflect on. What that means is, of course, Alex, and you talk about it in the book, that for a lot of people, being in lockdown, they experience something that people with mobility issues are faced with all the time. And it would have been an amazing uh, opening for able-bodied people to to practice a little, I don't know, empathy or reflection on their own privilege. But it seems most people go like, "Oh my God, I don't want to be like that at all. Let's get out of here." So I think that's what Gentle here is expressing, if I understand her correctly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the interviews I had with Gentle and Shiloh were just fascinating, um and my family as well, who would like proofread my things for me, my mum and my sister specifically. That chapter is their favorite. It's just opened people's eyes to another way of thinking. I mean, I didn't even think it. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I think that it's very important that able-bodied people actually take a minute and go, actually, yeah, we need to get this better for the people, who are already having to deal with the issues that we're suddenly now facing over lockdown.
They can take
Um,
2 minutes or 3 minutes, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, this is a kind of an unreflected privilege. Again, I'm biased that way, and I'm sorry, I'm jumping in here, but I think that this is something that we could have, and we can still learn. We can still learn that these things that most people refer to as normal um, are not available to everybody on this planet, right? I mean, I think that that could lead to just a better way to live, to share the planet together, if we're realizing, like, the fact is that I can just get into the car in the garage and then drive over to the gym, and on the way back get my latte at the drive-through, and then I don't know, whatever is
yeah, I think
not the norm.
no, I think the pandemic definitely made people realize how privileged, they were, with the lives that they had before lockdown.
Mm.
Yeah, whether or not people are quick to forget, that's another question, isn't it? It's another issue. I think maybe the lessons that come from it, will they be learned, or are people quick to go back to the way they used to be?
That's a good question, Alex. I don't want to be cynical, but life forces me to become a cynic. What can I do? Nothing. Actually, I can. I'm not trying. Star here says in the local chat, the real issue to stay seated for long hours, says Star. This is interesting. And stay away from sunlight, and not having much air in your lungs to get one's blood oxygenated can be safe haven from the pandemic. So she's more referring to the online world as keeping her from the outside. And Shyla makes a good point. Of course, you can choose not to put your camera on Zoom. Absolutely. And then Shyla says, but there is often pressure. Absolutely.
Yeah,
My wife went, back to school, and there are teachers who, in a kind of very passive aggressive way, comment on this, and I don't think it's cool. Like, when somebody like is not using the camera. I understand it's a complex problem with smaller kids and teachers thrown into the thrown into the deep end of the pool, trying to engage kids and all this kind of stuff. Nobody says it's easy. Gentle Heron says in the local chat, non-disabled people can always look forward to a future when the quarantine lifts, or they are done with the one day in a wheelchair when the one day in a wheelchair simulation ends. Ooh, that is good, Gentle. People with
yeah,
disabilities look at those situations that are supposed to increase understanding as slumming. Ah, okay. Please define that term, uh, more detail, slumming. gentle, and take your time. I'm going to read that. Oh, we haven't even gone to any reading, Alex. What's going on here? What kind of a virtual book host am I? I need
There's
to
so
bring up
much to
one more
talk about.
slide. Hold on one second. Shyla says, Shyla's quote here is good in the book as well. Shyla says it was interesting to see able-bodied people's reaction to the situation, to see them have to go through the same adjustment, in some ways the same grief, that a part of their life was changing. But for me, it already is a way of life. I don't really consider Second Life a game. It's an extension to where I live. This is our own Shyla, important researcher here at the book club, talking about again ableism and able-bodied the situation as a disabled person in an able-bodied world.
I just loved that quote. I just thought it was just hit the nail on the head. It was just beautifully. It was just so eloquent as well.
Now, Alex, a different question is, was it fun to write the book or was it terrifying? A lot of
Oh,
authors, they say it was fun, but I never want to do it again.
it was 100% fun. I absolutely loved it. Even when I was up at like it was 4 a.m. and I was still trying to go through it for typos near the very end. Well, and that bit wasn't fun. Yeah, that wasn't fun. That was like the very last few days. But up until when I was actually still writing it, I loved every minute of it. It was just amazing. And the interviews that I had as well just made it so much more fun because everybody was so open with me. And you touched on this earlier when you said you were impressed by Philip Rosedale being so honest. Well, everybody was like that. I was really surprised by how open people were to actually saying things that I just wasn't expecting to hear from people. Usually game companies like to big up, their figures and all this. And then I had the president of King, who they make Candy Crush. He said, yeah, people didn't play our games for a while. They were too busy buying toilet roll. So we did see a dip in our usage, but then it started slowly rising over time. And I
Hmm.
just thought, yeah, it's great to hear so much insight, and it was so interesting, that everybody had an interesting story, and writing it up was just the most fun thing I've done. I think one of the most fun things I've done.
Hmm.
When it started getting hard, because we had this deadline that we'd shifted back a couple of months. We pushed it back, but we couldn't push it back any further. And I
Well,
think
the
that was when
turnaround is really amazing. I mean, I gotta hand it to you. It's so rich in these different experiences, and you churned it out so fast, and I didn't find one typo in it.
really, oh well,
Hmm.
I have found a few. I've had a few, which is it's quite
What?
stressful.
Now I
But
gotta reread it. Okay.
apparently, yeah. Well, my publisher says that apparently there were always typos in books, and that's what the
There is.
second
Yeah, yeah,
print
yeah.
run is for, to iron them all out. So I'm trying not to get too stressed about that. But yeah, we had to make some last minute changes for various reasons, and so the last it was supposed to go to press on the Monday, um, and so the weekend before I was still checking it for typos, and it was very stressful. I worked out with all the way through Saturday, all through Saturday night. Went to bed at 5 a.m. Worked all through Sunday, all through Sunday night. And I didn't go to bed on Sunday night. I found myself up at it was 7:20 and I was still in my living room going through for typos. And my alarm was going in 10 minutes. I was getting picked up at 8:10 to go to work. So I just went straight for a shower. And that was not fun. So it was not fun. But everything before that was just amazing. Will I do it again? I'm not going to say no. I'm still trying to get over this because I think the very end, when I was checking for typos, and then when it published as well, I had this new worry that I didn't realize I was going to have about how people are going to receive it. I knew
Hmm.
people would be reading it right now, and the stress hadn't ended at all because I was like, oh no, what if people
No,
slate it? What if people
exactly.
rip it apart?
Yep.
So I don't know if I will write another non-fiction book because I think that's very stressful in the fact that you could find a fact and someone could say no, actually you're wrong or whatever. If with fiction, it's all in your head, so it's a lot easier, you know.
Well, I'll talk with you when you write that, because then you'll get people, oh, this sounds she can't write, or this sounds like this, or she just ripping off Lord of the Rings. Hello. Uh,
True. Yeah, there's that. There's always the
um,
stress, I guess.
it's well, I think if when you put something out into the world, it's wonderful and rewarding, and I'm certainly an advocate for being a creative person and putting it out there, and just for you to create things. That process is, I think, incredibly healing and important. But of course, when you put it out there, you need to be prepared for people tearing it down and trying to kind of divorce yourself from that, or not yeah, not letting your personhood, your identity be crushed when people tear down the work that you put out there. It's very difficult to separate your work
Yeah.
from yourself. Gentle here is defining. Thank you, Gentle. Gentle is defining the word slumming. She says it means going to the slum to understand poverty, and when you know, you can go home, back to your middle class home. So, aha,
Yeah,
that
I
is,
get it.
yeah, that is basically, and you said, Gentle said wheelchair simulation, which I actually did when I did civil service in Germany back in 91, when there was still a draft, and we actually had to go into a wheelchair, and we were pushed around by our colleagues, and then we changed around to feel how it was for about 30 minutes, and then we had to write an essay about it. Um, it was meant with there was a good intent, but it certainly, if they should have done this like for a weekend. Okay, now we're running out of time. We're going to do one reading, Alex, and I would like you to read about actually Games for God and the Virtual
Okay.
Church of Chat. Let's bring up the book display. I'm grabbing the book display and bringing it up here. Uh, and this is amazing. And while you get ready here, let me actually also put up this slide, because religious services are
Gotcha.
available in games. They're also available in Second Life, as the audience probably knows. In my film, Virtual Cultures in Pandemic Times, there were funerals. Uh, One scene here, you can see this on this slide. There's a funeral of Gabi's father, who was in Venezuela. She's in Florida, and she couldn't go to the funeral, and she has a memorial place in Animal Crossing, and they did a funeral in Animal Crossing. I know people are familiar here in Second Life, and people do that, and it's a wonderful thing. But yeah, it shouldn't. For us, this is nothing weird or new. But I know for the general public it is. And please set up for us, Alex, the story here of Simon, who is
Okay.
Reverend Simon Archer, who has a virtual church.
So yeah, Reverend Simon Archer, he's a vicar at Belvedere Church in London, and over the pandemic, obviously they couldn't go. They had to close their doors. So Simon decided that he would buy some kit and learn how to stream his services online, so that people could stay involved at the church. And so he bought the kit. He watched some videos on how to do it, and he started streaming. And then he realized that maybe he could stream games as well. And so he started this channel on YouTube and Facebook as well, where he just play games, stream games, and people could talk to him about anything. And he called it the Virtual Church of Chat. Anyway, it
Mhm.
went viral. People picked it up, and it went absolutely viral. It was on the BBC and everything. So I wanted to chat to him about it, and he spoke to me a little bit more about what it was like. Because after he went viral, Bethesda, who make Doom Eternal, they were releasing that, and they got in touch with him and asked him if he would stream that game for them. And so I'm going to pick up halfway through this chapter, where he tells me, so he's gone viral at this point, and he's telling me a little bit about what it was like and why he did it. So I will just read through this now. So he says, Bethesda were releasing a game, he explained. It was Doom Eternal, and they asked me to do an hour playing the game online. The first person shooter game sees the player battling demons to save humanity, and the idea of a vicar sending demons back to hell in the game was hilarious. I streamed to 100,000 people in over an hour, and it was amazing, getting to speak to people who perhaps hadn't heard from someone from the church before, but without having any ulterior motive, not trying to get people to come to church. It's usually a while before we get into the subject of what we do for a living when I do my streams. And then when you say you're a priest, everybody apologizes, realizing that they've just been swearing for an hour or weeks or months. Then suddenly they're being very polite. And then they realize that you just don't care and they're back to being normal. But that's when people start to open up, he explains, and become curious about faith. You get people saying, I've always wanted to ask this, or what do you think about that? I'm going to skip on a bit because we're pushed for
Hmm.
time. So,
Hmm. No, that's good.
So the conversations he has within these live streams cover a vast range of topics, from the Euros to Game of Thrones to God, as well as discussing his faith. And he also offers support. Simon thinks the reason he went viral over lockdown was down to authenticity. He was just being himself, called on by God to combine his two biggest passions. He says, I do believe there is a connection between gaming and the church, and that's something to do with the way people come together. Some people serve God in very simple ways, and it's not always through the obvious paths. People come across my live streams, find a place where they can connect to someone who can perhaps answer some questions or at least listen to them. That's a ministry and that's a calling. So, yes, I was called to do this. Most clergy were flat out during lockdown, he admitted. Putting all the services together and doing online stuff, we set up a small food bank. Even when the church building reopened and we were taking weddings and baptisms again, people needed help. I'd get 2, 3, 4 phone calls a day just about mental health problems from new people, just because I'm the local vicar. People ran out of people who were answering their phone calls. I get it all the time, but during the pandemic, it was heightened. People left alone with themselves were really struggling. And I think mental health is a huge issue post pandemic as well, especially with young people. So for me, the streaming was a good escape and a good chance to speak to people who were feeling isolated. Simon has paused his streams for the time being. He's taking a well earned break after what sounded like a very heavy 2 years with the church. I love what I do so much, he tells me. My job is basically to make other people's lives a bit better. But it's painful, it's hard, it's long hours, it's a 6-day week. You're taking on more hats than you can possibly carry sometimes, and it's exhausting. Towards the end of the pandemic, I was burying 3 people a week. Oh my God, I reacted.
Hmm.
Not the best thing to say to a vicar. But he laughed, reassuring me that he gets it all the time, even from his kids. There were times, he continued, when we lost 15 members of our congregation. And to try and be positive and happy and get that energy you need to stream, it was really hard. And I just went, this is going to start affecting me. So I've taken a break. As I write this, I'm staring at a black and white photo of Simon in full clerical gear, his streaming headphones atop his head, eyes closed, head bowed with hands clasped, a silver cross hands around his neck. He looks cool. If ever there was a rapping reverend, and who knows, there may well be, this is exactly how I'd want them to look. In fact, I'm sure I had a similar looking poster of Tupac on my wall when I was 16. Look at me, seems strange. I'm a vicar and I can play games, Simon says in his video message on Twitch. I've got some skills, but mainly we're here about the community and the chat. It's a surreal feeling to look back at everything that happened over lockdown, Simon told me. He vows to relaunch his gaming ministry when he can, saying the experience was massively worthwhile. Whether you choose words or video games to get your message across to the masses, the pandemic has showed us that it's not the medium that matters, but the mission. Give people a place to feel comfort and they'll come. Play games and they'll come too. What many people needed during 2020 was not to be alone. And I think Simon needed his viewers as much as they needed him. Thank you.
Really, really fantastic. Thank you for reading, Alex. Please take a seat. This is I love this excerpt because it also,
Thank you.
and he says people wanted to be together, and I fully acknowledge, and I think this also comes across in the movie and when we spoke. I sometimes have the opposite problem that I want to be more alone, but it's everybody has different needs, and we need to acknowledge that if we want to come together, as in humanity, and this sounds real sappy, but I think that that is really important, and the common experience of the pandemic. I hope that we stick with what we learned there, and or at least that, assuming that people learned that lesson, that people have different needs, and there are different needs, and we need to have empathy for these different situations. um
Yeah.
we're out of time, and I need to be respectful of everybody's time here. This is just a really, really wonderful book, a very important book, and a really, really cool overview of what's possible and how different players think. And again, me being somewhat critical of the dark side of gaming, I was and the incentive of big game makers, like I said, making it very, very sweet and candy and like sugary drinks and stuff like that. Um, that is really an oversimplification, I have to admit. Uh, there's a lot of nuance here, and a lot of different motivations, and a lot of very well-meaning players in the space. I'm going to end with a quote that you pulled from my interview with you, and thank you for pulling this one. Apparently said, I forgot that I said it. I've been through this hype cycle like 3, 4 times where it's like the metaverse, and then the interest dies down, and then 5 years later, oh my God, the metaverse. And here's to another hype cycle. Um, it's gonna happen again.
Yep.
No. Oh, somebody speaks Welsh here in the audience, Mr. J.
I was just reading
Diolch.
that. Yeah, thank you. Hello, diolch.
Oh, oh wow, amazing.
Thank you
Um,
everyone for coming, by the way. I've loved it, and it's just been a great experience. And thanks for everyone's comments as well.
big audience today. It's really, really, really awesome. I'm looking through the notes. There's a bunch of stuff that we didn't get to, but you will have to read the book. Um, you should have it on your shelf. Gamification. Oh, the third place. Okay, I'm not gonna get into it. I love this book, Alex. It's a great accomplishment. Let's run through the credits and get out of here. But please, people, befriend each other. Very important, because this is about community. And before I go through the credits, I also want to thank Kitten Duo, who donated to this show. This show does cost money. We have expenses. And if you are a fan of this program, you can donate via Ko-fi. The link is in the YouTube description. Oh, we don't have a tip jar. Shyla, put a tip jar out if you can, and then people can donate Linden dollars in here. Angelica in the local chat says, "Woo, I need friends." Um, please befriend Angelica. She needs friends. And Pauline says, "Thank you, Alex, Dexter, Shyla, Isabel, for another wonderful book talk. Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you.
The
Thank you
show
so much.
is every Wednesday, 12 o'clock Pacific time. The show was established on April 8th, 2020. This is coming up on 3 years. The show is produced by me. The camera, the sound is by Isabel Chauvin. The avatars are made by Bespoke Caravan. Alex avatar is made by Isabel. Research by Shiloh the Super Gecko and Monkey. Location is always second.live/book club, and that will shoot you via teleporting to the place where we're having the show. Draxtor.com/SL Book Club. You can see who's coming up and all that. Show every Wednesday, like I said, 12 o'clock, unless we have somebody from the Southern Hemisphere. We got two sponsors that help us out with some Linden dollars to buy props and stuff. Bespoke Caravan, makers of absolutely amazing, fantastical avatars. You can see those here. There's also a video out, avatars made in SL, where I profile the folks behind Bespoke. Just an amazing group of folks. The other sponsor is, of course, the Black Forest board games, low land impact, high detail board games, gadget games, vehicles, and more. Arden's board games are simply amazing, and they work. Now, next week we have another free for all. If you're interested in reading something, or if you have a topic, please message me before next Wednesday. Let's just say until Tuesday. Okay, so anything goes next week, next Wednesday, 12 o'clock, right here on the Second Life Book Club. Thank you and goodbye.
Bye.